1 in 5 children in the United States are affected by a mental health disorder. However, only 20% of these students are receiving the care and treatment that they need for this disorder. Now, this information can be presented in this visual posted by the CDC in 2020. This small green band is the 20% of students being treated, while this large blue band is the 80% of students being left untreated for their mental health disorder in the schooling system. Now, mental health disorders can impact classroom learning and the social interaction of students of all ages. And it's important that schools implement these mental health resources in order to maximize the academic success and the well-being of their students while minimizing the negative effects that mental health can bring upon students. It's important to talk about mental health in school as kids tend to spend a large amount of their day in school. Grade school students can spend about 6 to 8 hours, 5 days a week in school, while college level students can spend anywhere from 2 to 10 hours a day working on their school. I believe I'm credible to give this speech as my school did not place a great emphasis on the importance of mental health in school, and in the past 2 weeks, 2 UW students took their lives due to the mental stress they were feeling. Today we are going to talk about how I believe there needs to be a greater emphasis placed on the mental health of students in school and how schools need to be given the correct resources, training, funding, and number of staff to support the mental health needs of students. Now, first and foremost, the rates of these mental health disorders are increasing significantly in students, and these are having drastic effects on the learning ability of these students. According to an article published by the NPR Education in 2016, students diagnosed with mental health disorders face the most challenges when it comes to learning, and they tend to have chronic absences, lower achievement scores, and a higher tendency to drop out of school. Now, the top 2 most common disorders in students tend to be anxiety and depression. And in the first piece of evidence I found was published by the CDC in 2020. And this shows that students affected by depression tended to be about 7%, whereas students affected by anxiety jumped up to 11%. And these were just grade school students, ranging from 12 to 17 years old. Now, the second piece of evidence I found was published by the Pasadena Vila, which is a psychiatric treatment center for college students who dropped out of college. And the top 2 reasons for these patients to be inducted into the treatment center was anxiety, with 24% of these patients feeling anxious, and depression, with 18.6% of the patients feeling depressed. Now, my last piece of evidence for this section of the speech comes from the Providence Health Team, published in 2019, and they state that there's roughly 50 million students enrolled in public school. However, 20% of them, which is roughly 5 million students, are showing signs of a mental health disorder, but a vast majority of them are not receiving the help that they need. Now, next I'm going to talk about the students' well-being and their academic success and how it's affected by the lack of mental health resources by the schools. So in order to convey this, I found 2 personal stories published online from real-life students affected with mental health. The first one was published by PBS in 2016, and it states how a young girl named Sydney, who was 15, was diagnosed with bipolar, and she began to find school very overwhelming, distracting, and hard to concentrate. And she eventually had to drop out because her school failed to give her the resources she needed to continue learning. Her mom was forced to quit her job in order to support Sydney to grow. Now, the next piece of evidence I found was published by the Mental Health Foundation in 2019. And this states how Ian, a young boy, was diagnosed with anxiety in grade school. And he states that there was very, very little talk of mental health and the importance of it in his schooling years. And he had to learn through social media the effects of mental health instead of learning that in school. And through that, he learned extremely bad coping mechanisms for his anxiety. He says that he believes if there was more support in his schooling system, he would have been able to recognize his anxiety earlier and learn better coping mechanisms than social media taught him. He also says that mental health isn't extracurricular, and it should be one of the most important things to learn in school. Now, the last thing I'm going to discuss today is how schools don't have the correct resources, training, and funding in order to support the needs of mental health in students. Now, first and foremost, teachers can play a crucial role in the mental health of students. However, we cannot solely rely on teachers to fix the mental health of our students, as they have a dozen of other priorities. They have papers to grade, lessons to plan, and 30 other students to deal with simultaneously. We can't expect our teachers to fulfill the needs of each and every student. And let alone, teachers are not fully trained in mental health. For example, in an article published by PBS in 2016, a teacher stated he was given one day with one passage to read about mental health for his students, and he feels as if he was left in the dark when it comes to his mental health and students. Now, second, counselors are responsible for over 500 students. This leaves it nearly impossible for counselors to track the behavioral changes in each and every student that he's accountable for. And secondly, counselors tend to talk more about academics rather than mental health. At least that was the case for my school. Now, schools really need to up the importance of mental health in school, and I believe that we need to hire more counselors. We need to hire more psychologists and up the funding in our schools to provide resources for these kids to turn to, as most of these kids are feeling alone and isolated, and they feel as if there's no place to go. I feel as if the schools upped their curriculum in mental health and made it more of a normal thing to talk about, kids would feel less frightened and less afraid to have a mental health disorder. Now, today we discussed how there needs to be a greater emphasis on the mental health of students in school. And even though all students are not diagnosed with an official mental health disorder, I believe that all students would greatly benefit from an increased funding, training, and support of mental health in schools. Thank you.